Video, if that's okay.
Okay. Do you want to just talk about the talking points that you've got here?
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about your life, if you don't
Well,
mind?
Let's see. I was born in 1939 in Grace, Idaho. I grew up on the farm.
Mm-hmm.
I lived there until the time that I went on a mission when I was 20 years old. And that we had dated before that, and we were thinking about getting married. And then she kind of felt like, well, maybe the time's not quite right.
Yeah.
So I kind of decided, because the bishop approached me, and he said, I wondered if I'd be willing to go on a mission. So I went, about 8 months later, I put my papers in, I left to go on a mission. And that was to the California mission.
Mm.
And at that time, it covered all of Southern California, and then it covered all of Las Vegas, half of California, all of Las
Really?
Vegas,
Wow.
all of Arizona, and then Las Vegas. So it was quite a large mission.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
And when I went into mission at that time, they didn't have an MTC. They just had a mission home
Mm-hmm.
right there by Temple Square. And we went in for 1 week.
Wow.
I received my endowments when I was there, and then I was set apart as a missionary by Elder LeGrand Richards, one of the apostles. And they put me on a train, and they sent me to California.
Wow.
And when I got to California, the mission president interviewed me like they typically do. And then what happened was they put me on a Greyhound bus and sent me to Tucson, Arizona.
Yeah.
And I was there about 2 or 3 months. And down there they have kind of a funny disease. It's called coccidiomycosis, but the generic form or name is valley fever.
Valley fever, yeah.
I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah.
So I caught that valley fever,
Oh, boy.
and I'd been out just that short a time, and I was in bed for about 2 weeks with 140 temperature. And there was a medical doctor there that says, you gotta let him go home. So I came home, and when I got in Salt Lake, I was just gonna go back up to Grace, Idaho. And what happened was President McKay's private secretary, Brother Haycock, met me at the airport.
Wow.
And he says, you're not going home. You're gonna go get in the hospital. But before he put me in a hospital, that was in 1959, they took me over to the church headquarters. And ironically, I met President Hinckley, who he wasn't an apostle yet,
Mm-hmm.
but he was working in the missionary department. So they put me in the hospital. It was kind of interesting because I was in there about a week, and then they sent me home, and then I had a relapse.
Oh.
And I come back for another 2 weeks. Now she came and saw me the first time I was there, and then the second time she came with her friend and saw me, and we had been engaged, but we broke it off. And her friend gave me a little card, get well, and in there she drew a picture of a diamond. And she says, I think your Nono would take your ring back
Wow.
if you gave it to her. So that sounds like a scary story, but it's a true story.
Wow.
I says, would you take the ring back? And she said yes.
Wow.
And so I went back on my mission after about 2 months recovery.
Wow.
And when I got back, actually I extended 2 months because I wanted to make sure I had done 2 full
2 full
years
years, yeah.
in the field. And I got home in the middle of July, and then we got married on September 1st
Wow.
in the Idaho Falls Temple, right?
Wow.
Right.
So are you from Ida, from Grace as well, or?
Well, I moved there my senior year.
Okay.
I had not been living there. But I had been living in Idaho, in a little town called Rockland, and my father was a foreman on a road crew,
Hmm.
and so when the road left was done, we moved.
I see. I
So
see.
I went to 5 different high schools,
Oh wow.
and I met him in Grace, my senior year.
She went there her senior year.
Makes sense. Okay. That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, my dad's from Oakley,
Oh, yeah.
down by Burley, if you know.
Oh,
where.
yeah. We had a sister in our mission from Oakley when I was out that was in 1955. Can't remember her name. She was quite tall, but I know it's south of Burley out there.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, very interesting. So from there, I went to college at the University of Utah, and I went there about, 2 semesters? And then we decided to go back and try being a farmer. And, well, how long did we do that? About 2 years? Yeah, and so we had something come up that kind of enticed me to go to do something down in California.
Okay.
Because I'd been experimenting with something a little bit. And so we decided to go to California. And we got down there, and that lasted about 6, 8 months? And then it kind of fell through. And so there we were, 2 little kids, and no job.
Mm.
And so I had some experience welding, because before I went on my mission, I actually worked on a construction crew where they were building a phosphate plant up in Idaho, and I was hired on as a welder. So I thought I had a plan. I wanted to get a college degree, and so what I did, I went and took a test, and I got certified as to do flat, vertical, and overhead welding, Los Angeles certificate.
Oh, great.
And
Cool.
in the meantime, I talked to a guy in the elders quorum and asked him if he had anything I could do. So he put me to work on an asphalt crew, shoveling asphalt and burning my feet.
That's a tough job.
And when I finished that welding, actually we decided to keep the job I had, didn't we, honey? And because of the fact that it paid as much as I could as a welder, and the guy, he was treating me good.
Uh-huh.
And after we worked for him, by the way, I started in 1965 trying to get my college degree.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went for about 3 years to night school, something like that, at Swedish Junior College in Long Beach State. And in the meantime, I'd been working for this guy, it was called Ewell Pavey, and he had me come in and start doing estimating as an estimator. And so we kind of worked through that, and we were able to save some money. And finally, in 1971, our 6th child was born in June, and that was the day, same week, that I got my degree in physics from the University of Southern California.
Oh, cool.
So it took us a long time to get through school. Well, right after that, I'd been working for him, and he decided he wanted to move out of the state. And we had no way to feed our kids or whatever. So what we did is we decided, I think we borrowed $1,000 from Bank of America, and that summer I studied and I got a contractor's license. I got my own license and started our own business.
Wow.
And when we did that, we took half of our garage and built a little office in it. And then what we would do is I'd bid the jobs. The guy was good enough when he left to write a letter and say that he's leaving and I would be trying to do their work for him. So we had a pretty good little clientele built up. And so we hired a couple of people to work for us, like Bill Deacon and Bernardo. And in the meantime, she really had the big job because we had 6 children.
Yeah. Wow.
And so as time went on, it was very interesting because in those days, if you know anything about it, we didn't even have computers like they got today.
No.
And the crews would go out and they'd put stakes in the ground like a 40-foot grid or something like that. And it was quite laborious, but we had to do it. That was the kind of work we were doing. And so gradually it started working out pretty good for us. And we got a few more people and hired more people and things like that. And about in the middle of the 80s, when we'd been in business for a while, they started designing plans on computers. And I got thinking, there's got to be a better way to do this.
And staking.
Than putting stakes in the ground.
Yeah.
And it was just when they were using lasers and the GPS system was coming along. So I got the idea, why can't we take the computer that's got the database in it, let's put it on the Earth mover, and then it's got what it knows it's supposed to do. And if you can do that, then you ought to be able to eliminate driving these stakes in the ground. So we did that, and I filed that patent, and I got a patent on that in 1989. And that's just as the satellites were starting to get put up.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting experience. Our grading company, I guess, it had grown quite a bit. And I think one thing that was important is if you treat people ethically, and I hired a lot of people to work for me, but I was always careful to make sure that it wasn't just a good fit for our company, but it needed to be something that would be good for their family situation. And so we tried to be sensitive to that. And we had a lot of wonderful employees that worked for us. In fact, it's interesting. We had one guy, his name was Gary Castillo, and he was the equipment dispatcher. And so he'd help line up the equipment because at one time I think we had about 8 or 9 foremen running projects in the field.
Wow.
But he liked to see. So one year what he did is at KFI in Los Angeles was offering an award to anybody that could come up with some kind of song or something to commemorate Christmas. So he liked to sing. And he was Spanish. So what he did, he put together a proposal and had us get involved in that. And we won the prize.
Really?
Like engineering.
Well, that's
We
great.
won the prize. Remember that, Eddie? And it was, as we walked through that, there's always came new things along that made it so that you could be more effective in what you were doing. And I remember when they first come up with fax machines, what we did is we set it up so that all of our foremen in the field had a fax machine in their home. Then what we would do is the dispatcher would schedule the equipment and he would fax that to their home, and that form that they had also had where they had to record what they did with each of the categories of work that day. And so we did that, and then they had to fax that back in at night. And then I had somebody in the office that could key into the computer what was going on every job, and we could kind of see what was, just to kind of keep track to make sure.
We use the tablets now, so all our guys have tablets,
Right,
and they do
right.
it right on the,
Right.
all their inspection reports.
Yeah,
It just comes in.
but you didn't have
No.
internet then.
But
Yeah.
to go back to the GPS thing, I mean, it's kind of the norm now to see that GPS guided equipment on
Oh,
They
sites.
have that little thing up there.
Yeah.
Whenever we go by, I say, "Oh, honey, there's your invention."
I do too. I tell everybody, see, I know the guy that invented that.
Well,
I think it's just so cool.
Yeah, we were driving down the road about a month ago, and I said, "Hey, honey, there's our invention. It was on a road blade." Yeah, she says we should have got more money out of it. But that was a good experience.
That's just impressive that you had that much foresight. I mean, '89, the
Oh, yeah.
GPS was not really. I mean, this had selective availability. I mean, it wasn't very accurate. It wasn't. I think that's just
No.
really cool that you thought about
But
that.
now, it's like here, I'll let you have some of these. There's a little article about showing here. You can get that some of the boys.
Thank you.
It talks about that because they can grade that for millimeter accuracy
Yeah,
now.
it's amazing. It really is amazing.
You can keep up.
We'll pass them out to the boys on Sunday.
Yeah.
They were interested in this in particular when I told them
Yeah.
about that. So
And so it's kind of an interesting situation because sometimes when you get a patent, it's also a license to have somebody want to sue you.
yeah,
And what happened is we signed a license agreement with Spectra Physics in 1989 or 90. They were developing it. And then we talked to Trimble. And then later on, as we kept following through with that, we kind of got out of the grading business at about 93 or 94. But what happened was there was a couple of companies like Trimble, they were just brushing us off. And we filed a lawsuit because we felt like they were infringing
sure.
on us. And so we had the license agreement with Spectra, but Trimble bought out Spectra, so now they're responsible to us. So finally,
Is that why they bought out Spectra then?
yeah, well, I don't know, but
I
when they
bet they
bought
did.
out, they also got married to us,
Yeah.
you know. And so what was interesting is that my wife and I, in 2002, is that when it was, honey? Yep. 2002, we got talking, and we said, we had this lawsuit going against Trimble. And so we said, I talked to my wife, and we both felt the same, that we need to put our papers in to go on a mission. And we thought, how can we do that? We haven't got a court date set for a year and a half, but we said, well, we're going to put our papers in. And about a month after we put our papers in, Trimble come back and says, we want to settle with you. And so they asked us, when would we get our call? Well, the papers come in about March or April, but the call came when we got the impression. That's what we need to do.
Yeah.
Right, honey?
Yep.
Yeah, we both agreed on it. So we got this settlement agreement, and we had this mediation with Trimble, and we spent 2 days in mediation. You know, when you mediate, we got one guy sitting on the table, and here's their side of the table. They had an attorney from New York, attorney from California, the technology specialist from Trimble, and here I was with my attorney on this side of the table.
From Salt Lake.
And we dickered back and forth, and finally, I just said, well, I just had the impression come to me, if you'll settle for this, we'll go for it. And they said, well, we're not authorized to do that much. I said, well, go talk to your people. So they come back and they says, we'll do it. So then we agreed to that. And they says, wait a minute, we got a problem on our hands because we have got a joint venture agreement with Caterpillar and they're tied to us. So then we had to talk about that and come up with another number to include Caterpillar. And when they got through, the paper said the people from Trimble said, "Oh, we'll send you the papers to sign." And our attorney says, "No, you're not going anywhere," because he already had them filled out. He just had to put the numbers in.
Yeah.
He made them sign that before they left. It was kind of an interesting experience.
Yeah.
And one of the guys that was with Trimble, I had met him once before, about 4 or 5 years before that, in negotiation, trying to settle with them. And they just didn't want to do it. But I thought, gosh, that guy's, man, he's a weird guy. Well, what, to show how good a character judge I am, when he got through with the settlement, he says, well, that same guy, his name is Dr. Janke, he said, gosh, he says, I got some time left. He says, I've always enjoyed listening to the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. I wonder if I could go over and take a tour around Temple Square before I get on the plane. And I thought, well, I guess he's a pretty good guy. So anyway, we went on our mission,
And where did you go on your mission?
Cincinnati, Ohio.
Oh, okay.
As a couple, so we went back there. That was a great experience. And it's kind of like going on a honeymoon, you know? Wasn't it?
It really has.
She was the secretary to the mission president, and she put right on her papers before she left. Tell them what she put.
It put on there, do you do computer? And I said, no, I don't. And when we opened up my papers, and it was secretary to the president,
Yeah,
my
yeah.
kids just laughed. Mother, they said, Mother, Dad has to do everything for you. What are you going to do? But I did learn it, and he said, goodness, he was in the office with me, and he taught me in the mission office how to do the computer.
Oh, that's great.
And,
She'd say, Elder Honey, would you come over here and talk, help me figure out what's on this computer?
So anyway, that's where I learned to use the computer.
Oh, that's great.
So, anyway,
Did you
well,
tell
we-
him about that guy he was telling you about? He joined the church, and Philip and I went back and got to.
no, that was a different guy.
Oh, that wasn't
that
the
was a
same
different guy.
Oh, okay.
We had a guy that we rubbed shoulders with for years down there when we were doing the grading construction. He wasn't a member of the church. And so he told me one time, he says, every time I go up to Salt Lake, somehow or other, I get just this urge to go and drive around Temple Square. Well, he eventually joined the church.
Wow.
And then my wife, he invited us to go with him when we went through the Oakland Temple, so we went over there.
Oh, that's
The
neat.
Oakland Temple. So anyway, Ryder, do you know what happened? We went on a mission, and we says to the mission president, to the attorney, you got a couple other companies out there that are infringing on this. Write them a letter. So we went on our mission. He followed up with letters, and we got another settlement while we were serving these missionaries.
Yeah.
And then what happened is after we got back, there's another company about Switzerland that came, Leica.
Leica, yeah.
Yeah. And
You're a big one.
that was an interesting experience. They come over and they wanted to meet with me, and I met them up at the Salt Lake Airport. And they had all this dog and pony show on their computers, showed me all the things that they're doing. And then they offered me so much, and we finally worked out a settlement amount. So we got that settlement.
Oh, interesting.
So that was
Very
kind
interesting.
of fun. Yeah. What else? After that, I had a son that had graduated from construction management at BYU. And we got in 1995, got involved with him in building assisted living homes up in Idaho.
Okay.
And that was a good experience. It really was, because if people get to the age that they've got to have help, and they all
Like that.
they got great stories.
Yeah.
And so we got involved in that, and we were building, gosh, I don't know,
About 7 of them, didn't we?
yeah, something like that.
Uh-huh.
Our son built one or two while we were on a mission. So that worked really good.
Oh, that's great.
And then, I don't know, what else have we done? Just had to have kids.
Well, he's got another little thing he's working on now that he just got a patent on.
Wow.
Well, we just filed it down.
Just filed a patent, but we're not
That's
going
great. You're
to-
still actively doing that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
it's kind of interesting. The tide mode of physics, something like that, and so.
Wow.
So we're hopeful that that's gonna, it's kind of something that, you know, if there's a better way to do it, we ought to be doing it, you know? And, so we're hopeful this is something that'll be like this other thing.
Mm-hmm.
You can probably, you know, the idea was there, and I got the patent on it, but the actual work of refining it and making it come to the table has been the competition worldwide and the advancement of electronics.
Yeah.
Gosh, when we filed that patent, I think I had a desktop computer about a year, but in 1991, and it had 22 meg. I don't know.
Yeah. They didn't have a lot back then.
No. In fact, I remember in 1978, I decided to buy a computer to help run the business. And pretty soon the hard drive, which had 10 megabytes, okay, not gigabytes, megabytes, it got full, so we had to put another 10 megabyte hard drive in the computer, $10,000.
Ooh.
And now you can buy a terabyte for less than whatever.
Yeah, $50.
Yeah, you know, when I went to school, Ryder, you ever heard of a slide rule? Get your dad to tell you about it.
So I've got a big
Oh,
thing on my
yeah,
wall.
Yeah.
So I have on my office at work, I have a huge one that they would use, the professors would use to show the students how to use the slide rule up in front of the class. So it's, you know, it's 10 feet long, but it's a working slide rule.
Wow.
It's pretty cool. I don't know how to use it, but it's kind of a fun thing to have on the wall.
When I went to college, they didn't have computers.
Yeah.
We didn't even have calculators like you got. And if you wanted to figure out a trig function, you had to go open up the back of a book and do interpolation.
Yeah.
And so things are really, in fact, I wonder, have you ever heard of the U-2? What was that big high-flying airplane?
The U2.
Yeah, and it could get up to 70,000 feet.
Yeah. That was
And
all built.
it got shot down once.
Yeah.
But they got a model of that in San Diego, and I think they've got one maybe up here at Hill Air Force Base. That's nothing but engines, but it's amazing how they did that just with
Slide rules.
plans,
Yeah.
and written plans and slide rules.
Yeah.
And golly.
Yeah. It is pretty neat.
Anyway, but you know, I think our philosophy has been, you need to live the gospel. And the most important business you're probably gonna run is in your own home. And if you take the principles that the church teaches you and build your business on that kind of a foundation, why, it helps, it's good. And I think one of the experience I learned as a missionary is you learn to work with somebody else that's a little different than you know? And if
Oh,
you're
yeah.
gonna have a successful marriage, that you can't get better training anywhere in the world than being on a mission. And
That's
I
true.
hope all these young men are on that path to do that because it'll bless their life.
Yep.
And the other thing is picking good friends. I've had some friends, a lot of my friends in high school were good, and some of them weren't. But I've lived through to see their history of what they'd gone through when they weren't,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't work stuck, you know what.
Yeah, I do.
And probably the best thing I did is pick a good wife that keeps me on track. And I don't know, we've been very blessed in so many ways, and I look at what we've been able to accomplish, you know, a lot of it has just come to you by doing what's right and then listening to the promptings. One time, I remember I had a job and I'd agreed with somebody to take the dirt that they had for so much a load. And it was just a handshake deal. And he starts bringing the dirt in, and I was buying it. And some other guy come along, I won't tell you his name. He said, hey, you're paying $14 a load for that dirt. I'll do it in for $7. I says, no, I've already made a commitment. And we're doing it. And what was interesting is that guy, he says, oh, he says, you can go paint ethics all over town. And so what was interesting is later, he was a member of the Southern California Contractors Association. And he was one that nominated me to be a member of the board of directors. And so I served on the board. Then I was the treasurer, the assistant and then I was the secretary, and then the vice president. And they just kept moving me up. I would have been the president, but what I did is that I moved down the state before I got to that.
Mm.
But I've been in offices. I'd go in sometimes and somebody'd say, hey, Clegg, you want a cup of coffee? Another guy'd say, he don't drink coffee, he's a voter.
Yeah.
And I never told them I was, but I think they know.
Yeah.
So it's great. You got any questions for me, Ryder?
Are there any of those that we submitted that you want to answer? That
Well, let's see. Well, I've never regretted going on a mission. I learned how to get along with people. And you'll get companions when you go Ryder that sometimes they don't want to work. I had one missionary companion. We were supposed to get up 6 o'clock in the morning. So I get up at 6. We got put together. He'd set his alarm at 5:30. They'd go off. He'd reach over and touch it. 10 minutes later, go off. He'd put it over and touch it. Go off. Finally 6 o'clock. And I said, why don't you turn that thing off so it don't go off? Just get up when you get up. So you learn how to get along with people. And
yeah.
let's see. I don't know. My career, I thought it was kind of interesting. One of the things that we did, if you try to keep yourself organized, we had some software set up so that we could take off. That's one thing we developed, was some software so we could sit down, take the numbers off a plan, and then figure the cuts and fields. And we had a plotter that we bought so that we could do it like a 3D. You could see, people could kind of visualize it.
Like a heat map?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know what it is. It was kind of in the olden days, but one of the things we found, that we had certain clients that when they got ready, they would, and the engineers would draw the plans. Like Richard Henry, I can't remember his last name right now, but he says Phil. He was a developer. Go there and look at them plans and see if they're gonna work okay. So I'd go over and look over them, and I said to this one group, I says, you know what? If you make these adjustments in the grades, you're gonna save quite a lot of money because it can be done without much dirt in. And they says, well, we only got so much money to send it to the building department, and so we only got so much in our bid to do it, so they didn't want to change the plans. I thought that was interesting. But in conjunction with that, one thing we did, I set up a separate sub-company that I had people that were trained to do calculations. And so we had civil engineering companies that would come to us because they didn't like to do the dirt calculations.
So you do like a balance on the site?
Yeah, if so, we could just run cut and fill count and give them the numbers, and they'd have to put them on the plan. See, well, the thing that gave us an advantage is we kept a database of that because we could see projects coming up that we're going to have dirt to get rid of, or what dirt that needed to be hauled in.
Then you could balance your work.
Well, yeah, we'd get a heads up on what was coming up as far as dirt's going to be available. That was kind of
That's a great niche.
yeah. And then the other dig we did is that also I have a couple of guys that 2 or 3 guys that after I left they started their own business. They used to work for us, but see, once you start getting these databases and using these GPS technology, you'd have to be able to do some tweaking to get it in the right format when you put it on the right or the whatever. So that was kind of just a little niche. One of the guys that took over and, well, after I left, he was doing that, he just whatever. So kind of fun.
Yeah.
Well, you're probably about out of battery.
Well, we really appreciate your time and giving us your insights. It's been very
One
interesting.
of the things, my wife and I, she's been a rock. But I remember that when Joseph Fielding Smith was the prophet, and they asked us to do home evening, he says, if you will have family home evening, you will not lose your children. And I don't know if that's guaranteed, but we always tried to do that. That was, we felt that was important. And we kind of lucked out, I guess, because of our 9 children, they're all active in the church. And there's just little things like that. If you see a principle you're taught, and the brethren tell you to do it, if you do it, it works. And that's great.
Yeah.
One piece of advice, you don't like advice, do you? One thing I was going to say as advice, if they haven't had your patriarchal blessings, you need to get it.
That's great advice.
And then use it as a guide to what you're doing in your life. I know when I got mine, in my patriarchal blessing, it says, you have been born of goodly parents. Therefore the Lord expects you to keep his commandments. I thought, man, you sure would. I didn't think my parents were all that great. But later on, when I got out in the world and got a little sense, I realized what good people they were.
Yeah.
So, anyway, these are great young men.
They are. And thank you so much for your time and for doing this. And we're going to play this for the boys so they all get the benefit of
Probably boring.
Oh, no.
You ought to ask me a question. You know one thing, there was a guy, have you ever heard of Charles Kettering?
That sounds familiar, but I can't place it.
He lived back in the early 1900s, and he had a philosophy, it doesn't matter what you're doing, there's got to be a better way. And so he was the guy that had over I can't remember, 100 or 200 patents. And he was the guy that invented the electric starter for cars.
Huh.
And it used to be in the old days, you had to adjust the magneto just right, and then the guy'd get out there and crank it. And there was somebody that was driving a Cadillac, and they kind of got stuck on the mud. And so some guy gets out there and he tries to crank it, and it backfired and it hurt him really bad. So it went viral, and so Cadillac had to figure, we got to solve this problem. So they hired Kettering and a couple of his associates, and they went to work on that, and that's how the electric starter got invented on cars.
I hadn't heard that. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's great.
There's always a better way.
Yep.